Podcasts are hot right now. How do I know? Well, you're listening to one right now, aren't you? But you might be wondering, how on earth do I get my voice out there and start my own podcast? It all seems so intimidating. Between hosting and platforms and monetization, it can get real complicated real quick. Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We started this podcast over 2 years ago, not knowing clue one on how to do it. So how do we do it? We did it with Anchor. Anchor is the free podcast app with creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on all the platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And everybody likes money, right? Well, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So go right now, download the free Anchor app, or go to Anchor FM to get started. It's the eCommerce Minute, your daily dose of e-commerce, tech, and retail news with your hosts, Bart, Mroz, and John Suder. The eCommerce Minute is a production of SUMO Heavy, a digital commerce consulting firm in Brooklyn, New York, and Philadelphia. Find us on the web at sumoheavy.com. It's eCommerce Minute episode 639.
Today's episode, coronavirus disrupts overseas trade.
Unless you're living under a gigantic boulder, you've probably seen the plethora of headlines pertaining to the coronavirus. A coronavirus is a kind of common virus that causes an infection in your nose, sinuses, or upper throat. Most coronaviruses are not dangerous, but this particular case is. As of this recording on February 4th, 2020, China's Health Commission reported there were 475 recoveries, meaning people who were sick and recovering from the virus, and 361 deaths nationwide. It's a devastating outbreak, and the effects it has on global commerce have turned it into an even more of an international disaster. The coronavirus also just happened to hit during the Lunar New Year holiday, which is one of China's busiest shopping periods. After returning from a long holiday for the first time since the coronavirus's threat became clear, Chinese investors sent shares in China down about 8%. Since then, the stock markets around the world have plunged as the realization that a public health crisis could morph into an economic shock. International companies that rely on Chinese factories to make their products and depend on Chinese consumers for sales are already warning of costly problems. Apple, Starbucks, Uniqlo, and IKEA have temporarily closed stores in China. Shopping malls are deserted, threatening sales of Nike sneakers, Under Armour clothing, and McDonald's hamburgers. Factories making cars for General Motors and Toyota are delaying production as they wait for workers to return from the Lunar New Year holiday, which has been extended by the government to halt the spread of the virus. Also, in another sign of deep concern, China's leaders on Sunday outlined plans to inject fresh credit into the economy. That will include a net of $22 billion with a B to shore up money markets, as well as the looser borrowing terms for Chinese companies. International airlines, including American, Delta, United, Lufthansa, and British Airways, have also canceled flights to China. With flights to China limited and emergency public health restrictions in place, the Chinese operations of multinational companies are likely to be constrained. Major banks, including Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase, are directing that employees who have visited mainland China stay home for 2 weeks. As you may have guessed, the donations have been pouring in. In the United States, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation announced that it would commit $10 million to aid first responders in China and Africa, including $5 million for international cooperation, treatment, and vaccine development. And Alibaba founder Jack Ma, the second richest person in China, reportedly pledged $14 million or 100 million yuan to efforts to develop a coronavirus vaccine through his Jack Ma Foundation. We'll keep track of the story as it continues to develop, and our thoughts are with those affected by the outbreak. You know, we usually do some lighthearted stories here, but this is some serious stuff, kids.
Yeah, just a bit.
I'm just wondering which way it's going to turn. It's like watching a storm.
Well, I mean, you look at it. I mean, SARS had the same thing, right?
And the
SARS,
bird
Ebola, flu. All the big stuff, the bird flu. So there's definitely those kind of things. But China is right now like, I think it was less with SARS, but this is like huge for international commerce itself, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the real problem here is that there's going to be definitely, and there already is a ripple effect only from this small part of the outbreak.
Yeah,
and with any of these kind of things, it's containment is the key. What is impressive about China is how they're going about trying to contain this in that they basically said, okay, we need special hospitals. They're building a hospital within 2 weeks. This special coronavirus hospital just for containment.
Yeah.
Basically closed off cities. Can you imagine if they tried to do that in America or maybe even a lot of other countries? They basically said, you know what, the Yunnan province, you're closed. You're closed. No one's going anywhere.
Yeah. Imagine it's like, oh, we'll just close Philly.
Yeah, we're just going to listen. Philadelphia's closed for a while. Everybody sit tight. I mean, it's not
like
to laugh at. It's just
no. It's like, or imagine being closed. Like, I mean, I guess. See, what city would be good? not good, but that's a wrong word.
Yeah, let's rephrase that.
I meant that as what city you could actually close it off? I guess Manhattan, right? Because it's all bridges and tunnels, so you can just close it off. It's just an island.
Right.
Yeah, that's so weird.
But yeah, and of course you've got the people who are like, oh, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. There's a story going around of the woman who knew she was traveling to France. She knew that she was ill. She took a bunch of medicine because they basically scan you as you're in the airport to see if you have a fever. She basically brought her fever down so she could get on an airplane and travel to France and go to all these Michelin star restaurants and bragged about it and then came home. I mean, it's just irresponsible, stupid crap like that. That's how pandemics start, just by ignorant, stupid people. But the real story here is what it's going to affect on global trade.
Right. At least for this podcast, it's the global trade side, right? It's hard.
It's hard. The problem is there's a lot of ignorant people out there who either they're on the side of they're panicking. So what you're seeing, and we'll give Philly as an example. People are they connotate coronavirus with Chinese people. So our Chinatown now, people will refuse to go to the Chinese restaurants because reasons. Yeah. Stupid things like that. Or the other people that think the coronavirus has something to do with the beer. And there's a number of research results for that.
Yeah, there's a story apparently in Italy. Like a Chinese kid came on the subway and the woman was like, he's like, he literally said, he was like, I've never been to China. I'm like, come on.
The Google Trends Twitter account noted that worldwide search interest for coronavirus symptoms had increased by 1,050%.
Ooh, previous to the week before.
In one of those search terms was corona beer virus.
Corona beer virus. Jeez.
People are stupid.
It's just what
people have no concept of that. Like the same name could mean different things. Like people have the same name doesn't mean the same thing.
Yeah, well.
It's like, do they think Dwayne The Rock Johnson is a giant boulder? Like,
probably.
That's what I don't. I'm like,
probably. And we'll stick on the theme of people being tone deaf. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross actually said this. He said that the virus could help bring jobs back to the United States. I'm not even going to comment further on that. You could just take that and let that nestle in your brain hole and, let that.
I heard that the other day and I was like, wait.
Well, he's a very old, out of touch man. So, R.I.P. Wilbur Ross. And there's more donations from tech giants like Baidu, Tencent, Huawei, and ByteDance. They're all run by billionaires, of course. They've pitched in to combat the coronavirus. Specifically, Baidu, Tencent, and ByteDance together pledged $115 million or 800 million won to research new treatments to help authorities in the most effective areas, while Huawei contributed to the construction of the Haoshenshan Hospital, a new emergency facility that's being built in Wuhan. That's the one that I referred to. I didn't know the name of it. But they are building this hospital in like 2 weeks. It's very, very impressive. It's very rare that we talk about American ingenuity, but when the Chinese want to do something, they'll build a road. They'll build a 50-mile road in 3 days if they have to. It's
pretty much
very impressive. It's humbling almost. And of course, we have the surge in demand for hand sanitizers, soaps, and masks. What a lot of marketplaces are doing now, they are stopping the sales of masks so that people aren't price gouging, which I think is the right thing to do. I don't think taking advantage of people in a desperate time is good business, but there is money to be made, and that sometimes people don't care about what's right. They just want to make that buck.
Classic.
All right, we'll close this happy story with a little stat time. The Asia Pacific region was forecasted to be the fastest performing region for the airport retail spending in 2020, but travel on the first day of the Lunar New Year last weekend declined almost 20% annually, and I think that's going to continue, so that's going to put a dent in the travel business. China's economic growth is expected to slip this year 5.6%, down from 6.1% last year, according to a conservative forecast from Oxford Economics that is based on the impact of the virus so far, according to the New York Times. And finally, Evercore says the coronavirus could add an additional 2 to 4 percentage points to L Brand's overall same-store growth. They're the people who in Bath and Body Works and sell a lot of hand sanitizers. So someone is making money on the coronavirus.
And hand sanitizer doesn't really work. You got to wash your hands, people.
Good for L Brands, considering their other brand is not doing too well.
What's their other brand?
Victoria's Secret.
Oh, Victoria's Secret. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. All right, you guys got anything else?
Nope.
All right, we'll keep an eye on this story, and if there's anything worth reporting as an update, we will do so on this podcast. You can find full show notes wherever you get your podcast. If you like the podcast, please tell your friends, tell them to subscribe and do all that fun stuff. And if you want to find us or talk to us on social media, everywhere, we are at SUMO Heavy. That's your e-commerce minute for today. That's it for today's show. If you like the show, do us a favor and subscribe or leave us a review on iTunes. And don't forget, you can now listen to the e-commerce minute on your Amazon device. Just add e-commerce minute to your flash briefing. And finally, if you have a comment or suggestion or just want to say hi, find us on social media at SUMO Heavy.